Good evening, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for our next Knowledge Labs webinar. My name is Dr. Jillian Mulvale, and I will be the moderator for today's conversation. I am the Associate Dean, Graduate Studies and Research here at DeGroote School of Business. And I'm really excited to be here today and to listen to our panelists' expert insights. I'd like first to start with McMaster's land acknowledgement. McMaster University recognizes and acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. We are always thrilled to see people joining these webinars from all over North America and the world. So thank you for your interest in continuing to support DeGroote and our programming. Today we have a very timely topic lined up for you. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, we have been separated from our communities, more so than we have in the past, and therefore our communities have been separated from us as well. The backbone of our communities is our small businesses, and they have been struggling. Today, we take a deep dive into their world. Joining us today are two DeGroote faculty members and a DeGroote alumnus who are experts in their fields and will help us explore the world of small businesses. The discussion will focus on ongoing recovery and explore where the opportunities for growth exist. I'd like now to introduce today's panelists. First, Dr. Benson Honig is a professor and the Teresa Cascioli Chair in Entrepreneurial Leadership at DeGroote. Dr. Honig studies entrepreneurship worldwide with some of his research interests including business planning, social entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship in environments of transition. Our next panelist is Dr. Brent McKnight. Dr. McKnight is an associate professor and studies how firms and organizations address complex social problems. Currently, this interest has led him to research the roles of firms in community resilience. Our third panelist is Tej Sandhu. Tej is a BCom alumnus and co-owner and founder of Merit Brewing, which is a local Hamilton success story. It is brewery, kitchen, and bottle shop. Guided by a team of ambitious friends, Merit strives to represent the heart, art, and soul of Hamilton. So welcome, Tej, Benson, and Brent, and thank you for being here today and sharing your insights. Before we get started, there's just a few things we want to go over. There will be a question and answer period at the end of the discussion. And at that time, please use the chat function included in this webinar today to post your questions, and we'll get through as many as we can. We have also collected the pre-submitted questions, and we will try to answer as many of those as we can as well. Also note, of course, that this event is being recorded for marketing and promotional purposes to be shared within DeGroote, McMaster, or with our speakers, participants, and other partners. Please contact the Marketing and Community Engagement team at DeGroote if you have any questions. With that, let's get started with today's presentation. So I have some questions to kick off this conversation, and the first one is aimed to all of our panelists. We're going to start with an open-ended question that all of you can jump in on. So, after the last year and a half of turmoil caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, among other things, where do small businesses currently stand? What does the landscape look like for them? Is there a roadmap back to growth and success? I don't know if one of you is ready to begin. I'll open it up to the three of you. Benson.
I'll take a stab at that because I've been working with small businesses over the pandemic. And I'd say, first of all, the glass is always half full, so there's always a roadmap and opportunity. All calamities and all events create opportunities. So while there's churning and some businesses will not survive, many will, and many will grow. And interestingly, in North America, there's been a surge in startups. So a lot of people that were laid off or weren't able to work or working from home reevaluated their own lives and said, you know what, I think this is a good time to start a business. So there's actually been a growth in startups. I think the roadmap really has to do, the landscape is is challenging, but it always is. The landscape looks like we're in possibly an inflationary environment, and it's one of radical change. So we've changed more in the last year and a half than we probably would have changed in a decade otherwise. If you think of all the home services and all the home deliveries and all the virtual meetings that we have. So that means that businesses have to change radically, but it also creates opportunities. And I'll just give one example of a woman in Hamilton I've been working with. She started a hair products firm, was primarily working in terms of distributing it through hopefully retailers. She pivoted and changed to begin home delivery, right? So it's a word of mouth product. She's, expanding her operation. I think she reflects a lot of small businesses where the goal is really to leverage the changes, the cultural changes that we're all experiencing, and growing into a new type of business where even a small business can compete effectively against the Amazons of the world, where delivery is happening very quickly and products are coming from abroad. So I think there's opportunity, but only for the most resilient and for those that are willing to adapt and change. If you're not willing to adapt, now is the time that your business will be closing.
Thanks, Benson. Tage, Brent?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd really double down on that. We really are at this intersection of there never having been more challenge for small businesses, both the challenges behind us and the ones that will continue to exist, but also there never really being more opportunity either. We've it's not necessarily as black and white as that for every kind of business, but I do really think many have, as Benson said, had to make the decision of how are we going to get through this? How do we adapt? How do we survive? The hospitality industry and in general has seen major changes and just enormous change in both consumer behavior, but also the delivery method of what we're doing as well. There's there's some incredible stories of change and adaptation as well. One of my favorite, Alo restaurant, like literally Canada's #1 restaurant, fine dining, $250 a plate. They started making burgers, and they sold 1,500 burgers a week. And they realized that, hey, we're not gonna be able to package up the full experience of what Alo's doing, but we can make a really damn good burger, and we're gonna do that. Let's get on the delivery apps. Let's use the experts that we have in the building, because it's obviously a group of very smart people to figure out how to do something that's drastically different, but make it successful. And I think some businesses have had those small changes, going from retail to online, but some businesses have had to, completely scrap their original game plan and really look at how their business, if they wanted to survive, has to completely change. It's both thrilling and exhausting at the same time, but it is necessary for those that want to come through this and have a better sense of their business at the end of the day through this as well.
Yeah, that's great. I just add that different geographies experience very different realities from this pandemic. You look at Windsor, well, a lot of crossover traffic is how they sustained their downtown core, and that wasn't happening. Look at Toronto with long shutdown periods. But then you look at they also suffered, and then you look at places like Picton or Collingwood where people relocated. They did better, right? So geography plays a big role, and I think it will continue to play a big role. I think different business types too, we've often acknowledged that. If you were redecorating your home, like many others, or engaging in a new hobby of cooking or something like that, the stores that reflect those hobbies also benefited. I think one thing in our research when we talked to retailers and restaurants on Main Street is all of these organizations were at some kind of crossroads. Something was going on. Maybe they're aging and they're trying to figure out what to do, or maybe their business clientele were changing, or maybe something else was going on. And so it's been really fascinating from our perspective to catch people at a bit of an inflection point, because it's creating an inflection point for most businesses. I just would maybe a less positive note is just that I think that the story's not really done until the supports drop away, and those are scheduled in 3 days or a few days that things are starting to change. So I really think that's when we're going to see the real impact from a closure perspective, because a lot of these businesses have been propped up. I don't mean propped up in a negative way, have been supported and helped by these initiatives on these government programs. And when they go away, that transition back to whatever that normal is could be very rocky.
Okay, thank you. Tage, I want to zero in on you for a moment now. And as the co-owner and founder of Merit Brewing here in Hamilton, and obviously a hospitality business, arguably the industry that was the hardest hit, how did you adapt to ensure survival and success? How did you weather the storm? Or are you still weathering the storm? What's it like from your perspective?
It's been pretty wild, to say the least. We, to put it most simply, had to throw out the entire business plan that we had before COVID. Merit and our model and what we had before COVID was rooted in our space, was our business was rooted within our four walls. We made it our mission to create a space and an experience that brought people in, whether you're from Hamilton or from out of town. We wanted you to experience the totality of what Merit represented. Again, our space on James Street, our people, being able to sit next to our brewery, drinking the beer that was made, feet from you, being able to talk to the people who know it most, experiencing Hamilton while you're doing that. All of that, basically went out the window on March 16th when we closed our doors for the first time. And we had to learn to be a very, very different business. About 99% of our volume that we produced before COVID was sold within our four walls, either on draft through our tap room or in the bottle shop at the front of the store too. And that at certain points through COVID got up to about 80% not in our space. We were able to still facilitate bottle shop sales through our own front door, which was always great. But 9 or 10 of the last 18 months, we haven't had any service at all. And when we have had service, it's been at drastically reduced capacities to the 162 people that we'd usually be used to with our taproom space and our patio as well. So we've made several pivots. It has been a really interesting, and it's strange to say, but kind of fun exercise in creativity. That I think is a very natural thing for our team anyways. We like adapting, we like making changes, we like trial and error, we like taking risks as well. So what that's looked like, it's looked like a few things over the course of COVID, early on in the pandemic, when everything was like fully closed, lockdown, no service at all. We really had to think about how we could still maintain a relationship with our customers. That being the core part of our business before COVID was the relationship, with being able to be present and be in a conversation with our guests. And so what that meant was if they weren't able to come to us and be in our home, we would meet them at theirs. So we had an existing online bottle shop, which was great. So we were able to quickly move to home delivery. We set up a schedule and brought in the resources necessary to make that happen. We bought a cargo van. We bought my mom's old minivan. We rented discount cargo vans. We had 250 deliveries going out to Toronto every Friday. 100 deliveries going out every week to Hamilton. We've set up a schedule to go to Kitchener and Waterloo and Guelph every other week, to the Niagara region every other week, to London and Brantford and Woodstock every other week. That was how we could meet our guests and our fans and our supporters. Thankfully that reception was great. People were in the mode of really wanting to support small businesses. They knew that our industry was incredibly impacted, and we'd thankfully established a reputation and a supporter base in the couple of years before COVID that we were open, and that allowed us to access an existing customer base, but also we were able to grow that customer base over the first few months of COVID as well, to a point where it was a tiny team. There were, we went from 22 staff to, at one point it was 3 of us. But as deliveries were back up, we were, back up to 6 people, and that's still a small team, operating and fulfilling that many orders and doing that many deliveries. It was the first of, what was kind of foreshadowing the rest of the year. And all right, let's keep being flexible. Let's keep figuring this out. And thankfully, the return to service came back. So, being able to serve people on the patio was great. The city of Hamilton implemented their outdoor dining district program, which meant we could have a larger patio than our normal Merit patio. We accessed some public space, or some public and private space behind our building to build a patio, bring in fencing. We bought tents, we bought heaters, bought 15 picnic tables that we set up as well, and again invested in the infrastructure that we knew would likely be what would be necessary to facilitate as much service as we could. And it was great having people back. That was a little bit of returning to normal for us. It felt like the things that fulfill us, and the reason we built Merit was returning, which was just really nice. And that was a short run of 4 months of service from July to November, or 5 months of service that we got there, and then it was back into another lockdown and another time of not being able to execute service. So we were heading into the holidays. We were heading into the winter. That thankfully, the time where we were doing those home deliveries, it was spring and summertime. People wanted to be in backyards or on porches or at their local parks, having a beer, maybe a couple more than they'd usually have because they, either weren't working or they're working from home. And but the winter's pretty different. So we again kind of had to be creative. We kept up our home deliveries. The holidays in general are usually a great season for us in bringing in large groups, especially at company parties or get-togethers with friends. And so we created kind of like digital like staff parties or staff appreciation packages as well, where we worked with everybody from Barton Bath and Tile in Hamilton to the Bank of Montreal capital markets in Toronto to facilitate again staff appreciation and kind of virtual holiday parties for people to kind of make up for what we'd usually be doing around that time anyways, still being a part of people celebrating and gathering virtually in that way too. But then I think the biggest change for us as well was a lot of the alcohol legislation changed through our COVID as well, and innovation by necessity or public pressure really pushed and moved the needle on alcohol legislation in Ontario, which historically is pretty restrictive. And there's been some pretty significant changes over the last year, specifically with regards to retailing alcohol. So now as a restaurant and a bar, we can not only sell our product that we manufacture on site, but we can also sell any other beer, that's produced by a manufacturer in Ontario. We can sell wine, we can sell cider. If it's available through a private importer or the LCBO, we can purchase it and sell it. And so we moved into doing that. We built a market inside of Merit when we weren't able to use our taproom space. So we saw our one of our biggest assets being our space and being our physical footprint on James Street, and built a holiday market that led into just being a regular market where we had 20, 30 different wines, a few different ciders, local coffee, local chocolate, honey, local produce, local bread, all the things that people were, ideally going out for a one-stop kind of like shopping experience, and built that out based on the new capabilities that were available to us. And that's something that we've kept doing as well. That's something that's not going away. It's actually leading to opening another business. I'm opening a beer and wine bottle shop in the east end of Hamilton in the next month or two as well. That is a result of that legislation changing as well. And that's I guess a sampling of all the changes and adaptations. The biggest area that we've really had to focus on was obviously ensuring we could keep up production. We are, at the end of the day, outside of being a hospitality business, we're a manufacturing facility as well. And, our engine is the brewery. We needed to figure out ways that we could keep the brewery running. And, the brewery also runs on efficiency. So we needed to, continue to produce a lot of beer, or as much as we could. So we also started working with other bars and restaurants to provide them with beer too, especially with the growth of the retail market opening up. We went from pre-COVID working with about 20 restaurants in Ontario, pretty much focused on either very distinguished like beer focused bars or restaurants, and some of the very high end restaurants in the province, to now we're working with about 200 different restaurants and bars. So building that channel and having another distribution footprint to help us move the needle on again, kind of keeping the brewery running and keeping volume flowing through any means necessary, being able to meet our customers where they were, and be able to, despite any restriction, still facilitate the same kind of experience that we've always loved, and the why of what we're doing here.
That's great. Thank you so much. I'm really struck by the fun part. I'm really glad to hear that's in the midst of a COVID discussion and COVID challenges, that you're still able to find fun in all of this. It's fantastic. So Dr. McKnight, I want to ask you a question next. Given your expertise on this topic, I'll throw this question over to you. Throughout the pandemic, we've seen large big box businesses such as Amazon, Walmart, and Loblaws, to name a few, thriving and growing their business during the pandemic, while small, put in quotes, Main Street businesses suffered for the most part. Where do you see the future of small businesses? What makes you optimistic or hopeful for these entrepreneurs and businesses that are built from the Main Street concept?
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I mean, what was going on especially at the start of the pandemic was people didn't want to go out very much. They wanted to go out once. They wanted to get everything they needed, and they wanted to go back to their cocoons for safety. And so I think that drove a lot of this kind of move to Walmarts and Loblaws and Amazon to try to avoid contact, right? I think that continued, and for some, that's still where people are at. I think there's some that are out there still feeling that way, but it's definitely given way to Main Street. But then a counter kind of movement at the same time has been a local movement, right? There has been a lot of individuals that have said, I want to buy local. I'm interested in buying local. How can I do that? And they've been seeking out these opportunities to explore their Main Street. So I think one of the most exciting things for retailers on Main Street has been relationship building. I think a lot of them felt like they found ways to connect with their customers in ways that they never had before, right? Like, kind of paradoxically, this notion that, hey, I know my customer now better than I knew than before COVID restrictions came into place. And that's because of emails and phone calls, and maybe just this need to engage and ask more questions. So we have that. We have, I remember a comic book store telling us about how they'd offer us Facebook Live session, touring their store, or a clothing company that took their fashion show online and then started engaging through Instagram, despite a lack of interest in doing so. They love that face-to-face, but they realized they had to do something different. And then just that importance of an established customer base. And I think Tej was mentioning it too, that like having a customer base was even more of an asset as COVID hit than it typically is, because it gave you an ability to pivot and respond in different ways. But I think that the new world of retail, and especially for Main Street, is engaging with customers in different ways, right? Through different channels, multi-channels. I don't think there's anything like a single channel retail anymore that's going to really effectively survive. And so, you need multi-channel, you need it through your social media channels, and not just pushing out, but actually engaging. You need it in person, you need it online, and you need some way of connecting those things so that it's seamless, right? Tasha's group does a great job of that with their emails and the way they engage their customers across. And I think the other thing that's really fascinating is this move away from hyper-local. When we think about Main Street, I think we typically think, oh, Main Street, the people that are around Main Street are going to come to this store, this retail, this restaurant. And I think increasingly we're seeing that that retailers are crafting a very unique image for themselves and creating a demand that stretches not just to that local community, but beyond, right? And I've talked to paint stores that are shipping across Canada. We talked to games and card stores that have created this kind of cult following that's not just right around where they are. So there is, I think, a real interesting shift towards creating a compelling and creative and unique value proposition within a retailer, and then that has play across Canada. Looks like I've got some serious sun issues here, so I'm gonna lower the curtains here. But that I think that is what makes me excited is the relationships that's being pushed out and being reinvigorated, and this kind of uniqueness that's being cultivated on Main Street.
Okay, thank you. Oh yes, Ted, do you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, Brent, I totally agree about the point of the local shop, not just focusing on local. I think that's been a really interesting change as well. Specifically within the hospitality industry, we saw so many businesses look at ways that they could get their product outside of their doors as well, and not just through delivery apps. There were, Berkeley North on King William Street had their fresh cheese, is one of my favorite things in the city. They were, packaging that up in quarter-liter containers and selling it to, some local grocery stores. Peter Pan on Queen Street in Toronto, excellent wine bar and cocktail bar. They started an in-house packaged cocktail program for their own customers, but then they realized they could actually create that cocktail program for other bars and restaurants. They actually went to, business to business and, went to other, bars, restaurants, bottle shops and offered this service, packaged, cocktail program. And they traveled across Ontario, to, again, kind of facilitate something that started as, hey, we'll sell, cocktails at the corner of, Queen and Peter. Actually, let's hit the road and figure out how we grow this past that. Yeah. It's been a really exciting thing for a lot of industries, but in hospitality, it's I think because people didn't want to just rely on delivery apps to get their product out there. They I think a few businesses really put in some creative effort to figure out other ways they could still create, but get what they were creating out in a different either method or in a different form.
Yeah, I agree.
Great, thank you. Dr. Honig, a lot of your research focuses on entrepreneurs, entrepreneurship, and business planning. And as we know, every small business is conceived by an entrepreneur. What would you tell entrepreneurs who are business planning for the short, mid, and long-term future? What are some of the things they should consider? Where do you see there being an opportunity for growth coming out of the pandemic?
Yeah, good question. One that comes up, that's come up periodically, or maybe that's the $1,000 question that comes up all the time. A lot of my research over the last 20 years has been to dispel the myth of the importance of a traditional business plan. I know that kind of might sound shocking to some of the people listening, but the reality is that the future is very unpredictable. And successful entrepreneurs are not necessarily the kinds of people that try and, future tell every small incremental change. You can come up with a perfect business plan that might be, a wild, acceptable plan for a class, or maybe even for a banker, or for your neighbor, or your wife, or husband. But that doesn't mean it's actually going to be useful in the real world, because the world, as we just saw with COVID, as Tej just demonstrated, has a habit of rearing its ugly head and throwing those plans right out the window. So a lot of work I've done has been to, first of all, promote the idea of contingency planning. And in contingency planning, you really want to have multiple plans of different sorts, of different aspects of your business. So rather than saying, gee, I want to get growth this way with this activity, you might say, well, I'd like to grow at this rate, and these are the three methods that I plan to organize in order to get to that, depending on what happens in the marketplace, what happens to my competitors, which I may have no control over, what happens to the environment, which I may have no control over. So I think that we have an over reliance on the notion that entrepreneurs are very good planners. We overemphasize that. Actually, my experience is they're iterators. They do what Tej did. They adapt, they pivot, they do different things. And given that the future is unclear, I would encourage, first of all, anyone who's got a business or planning to start a business to think carefully about where they can get sustained, continual income for them to survive independent of their business, on the assumption that if you're starting a business, it's probably going to be a couple of years before you're making enough money to live off it. So, step number one, make sure that there's a resource, some way that you can live while this non-profitable business sort of gets its legs and gets going. You might be surprised, maybe it'll make a profit from day one, but the odds are not. So, first step, make sure that you've got an income stream. Look at your burn rate and your cash flow rate. That's really important. But this overemphasis on planning, I think we can do better. I think we'd be better with more of an emphasis on innovating, more of an emphasis on alternative modeling, so that you can pick and choose the different directions you plan to go in as you advance your business. But these are challenging times, but then challenging times are what makes some of the greatest companies. Some of the greatest companies in the world were founded during the Depression. Recently, 2008, a lot of great businesses were started. And I think we're going to see a lot of really great businesses started out as a direct result of this pandemic. So it's a good time to start a business. That's why lots of people are doing it. And I just can't emphasize enough not to get overambitious in your objective to control, because control is just something that's very difficult, if not impossible, to do.
Thanks so much. I do want to go to Tej for a chance to respond to this. I noted in your previous comments that first thing you did, you said you had to throw out your entire business plan. So there was a business plan. Just wondering what, how you would react with regard to this in terms of business planning in the current environment.
It's really funny thinking about the business plan I took to the bank 6.5 years ago. I laugh at it when I think about it. Sure, it was great, from a confidence building standpoint for the bank. It was a good exercise in that, but boy, is it really useless right now. I do think that active business planning and an evolving business plan is completely necessary. The last year and a half has been an exercise in that we, through all of these changes, through each of the adaptations or growth of different channels of our business, we looked at a lot of the metrics, that Benson mentioned. We really tried to focus on low risk, medium impact, or medium risk, medium impact kind of activities that we could do to that would be complementary to the core part of our business, which is making and selling beer. The evaluation of all of those ideas, and there were ideas that absolutely did not come to fruition, that we thankfully killed before we could invest too much in. But we really had to look at on a project to project basis our cash flow and our burn rate. We really saw each opportunity as something that maybe this isn't going to work, but we got to try it. And if thankfully the team we have is incredibly positive, is incredibly hardworking, and, has a great attitude towards, willing any project to life. But, just because you will it doesn't mean it's actually going to be, have a positive impact on the business at the end of the day either. But I think we were able to really plan and in small ways, again, a full-scale business plan for each of these, adaptations of the last year and a half isn't really feasible or necessary. But, if you can look at a few key things that will mark the idea as as viable or not, that's necessary. Constantly, we one example that we I think was an incredibly low investment, kind of medium impact thing for us was selling our sausage wholesale. So we make sausage, primarily in our kitchen, and that's the food we love putting out with beer. They're intertwined, sausage and beer, like Bert and Ernie. But we couldn't facilitate that service in house. So what we did is, hey, we're heading to Toronto, we're heading to Kitchener, we're heading to Niagara. Anyways, what if we bought, a smaller, vacuum pack bag? What if we bought $150 worth of stickers and what if I spent a day, calling a bunch of boutique grocery stores, small, food shops. Some of the bars and restaurants that we were working with had, adapted their bottle shops to offer food as well. And all really look at, hey, what is $1,000, of time and, actual, cost, going to net us? And that evolved into a wholesale business that we built, working with grocery stores and working with small food shops to, now it's something that's going to be part of our business forever. The idea of having our sausages in grocery stores was always, part of the master plan, 6 years ago. When it was just a dream, but this was a way for us to test that in a small way. We're not in Sobeys, we're not at a Metro, but we're at the Dunder Market, and we're at Casual Gourmet in Westdale. We're at the Crown Point Market in the East End. We were at Mustard Seed before they closed. There's the ability to take a big idea, start small. Again, kind of like have a low risk assessment of an idea and see what the impact it makes. And so for us, that was our active business planning. Each idea, each iteration of what Merit looked like over the last year and a half came with that kind of evaluation. We didn't always have time. We didn't always have a lot of time to do the evaluation either. Sometimes we had to, especially right at the beginning, we had to make some decisions pretty quickly. But there still had to be some critical thinking around if it was going to make sense. And our goal was, literally from March 16th, as we started making changes, the kind of underlying hope for anything that we were going to try was that we could have it continue to exist after, COVID or, post, return to normalcy, whatever it looks like. But some ideas, most ideas will, continue to exist. And so we're able to, actually have some real data on some of these ideas now, which is great. And again, kind of helps us more actively business plan on an ongoing basis. And again, plan for growth of those components of our business. But, our goal was to create ideas that could be scalable, that could be something that exists to, make our business more well-rounded and less dependent on a single stream once we come out of this.
Okay, that's great. I'd now like to open it up to all of you to comment on what role you see small businesses playing in community growth. And on the flip side, what role does community play in the success of small businesses? Does one affect the other more? How do you see that relationship? How do they affect one another? I don't know who'd like to start with that one. Okay, Brent.
I'm happy to start. Yeah, I think, that in particular, the context that I've been studying in the main streets and whatnot, you cannot disassociate community from small businesses, right? Where Tage is down on James Street, I think it is James Street, right? Yeah, I know how to get there. I don't always know the names of the streets, but James Street, they've got a really vibrant community there, and that has been created in part by some of the work of the business improvement areas. which in every small main street across Ontario, there's over 300 of these business improvement areas that work hard to beautify and to bring people into a region. And to create a character as well. I mean, and it's not just the BIAs that do that, it's the businesses that are there, it's the people that are there, they create a character about a community, and that reflects the kinds of businesses that are there. So I see them as integral, and work that enhances community life and community identity should enhance the benefit of the businesses can bring and also draw from that community.
Okay, great. Any other thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I'll just pitch in that, we've been working a lot with entrepreneurs, what we call bottom of the pyramids, startups, de novo, nascent entrepreneurs. And we're always emphasizing that they need to work with the community in terms of what they're doing. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is it makes good business sense, right? Because if you have a community, then you have trust, and then you have a constituency. You have people that believe in you and that want to support you. But the other reason is, increasingly there's responsibilities that businesses have, not only to the bottom line, which is profit, but to the communities that they live in, the place that delivers the infrastructure, to the place that delivers their market, their consumers, their customers. We all have, families and friends that are in these communities. So I think that increasingly all businesses have got to look at issues like what is their impact on the environment and what is their impact on their community. And so when we work with nascent startups, we emphasize and integrate their relationship with their community and how they intend to foster that as being one of the foundational goals of that business. So I don't believe it's, it certainly works for some people to say it's all about the bottom line, and it's all about money. But I think the future, particularly in these challenging times in terms of environmental changes, pandemic is one example, but when you have these radical changes, you really do need to consider the community in order to survive. So, and avoiding that consideration, I think, is a business death sentence. So to me, they're integral.
Great. Tej, did you want to add anything, or?
Yeah, I'm so incredibly happy to hear you say that, Vincent, and that I'm really happy that hopefully more businesses are starting thinking like that. I think that is, hopefully, I think it's that it has been a progressive shift towards that, for sure. I've always thought, this is the first time I've probably verbalized it, but I've always thought that, we're nothing without our community, but our community can be something without us. So it's our responsibility to, be responsible to the community, and to, fulfill our, part of what it means to be neighbors. That's how we really look at ourselves. Yes, of course we are a business, and we are next to, other businesses and houses, but we kind of, talk about our community as a bunch of neighbors. And just like, if you have a dispute about a fence with your neighbor at your house, you need to work that out. You need to, work with other businesses in your area. There needs to be this shared sense of responsibility to the people that, live and inhabit and, that make the street active at the end of the day. That's been a through line for Merit from day one. It's, the reason so much of the work that we do in the community is rooted in the community right at the front of our doorsteps. We look literally at, Living Rock, a youth shelter right across the street from us. In the same building as Environment Hamilton. Down the street from us is both the Salvation Army and Good Shepherd and Mission Services. There are so many, organizations that are, really contributing to their community. There are so many people that, that make up our community that are both, well-to-do and, the hardest living Hamiltonians as well, that regardless of if you can, come in and buy a beer for $7.50, it doesn't matter to us. You're part of our community, you're part of our neighborhood, that, our responsibility really is to making Hamilton a better place for everybody. That being a through line for every business is definitely my dream as well. And I think we are seeing a more and more shared sense of that. Believe it or not, Jane Street doesn't have a BIA. I don't know if you knew that, Brent, but it's still a tight knit group of businesses despite that. But it's they're the organization collectively of businesses in the area is really driven by how we make James Street a place that is active, is exciting, is fun, is a place that people can come live, work, create, enjoy themselves, and just whether it's surviving or thriving, be safe there.
It's fascinating how tightly and described some of these BIAs are. Just 1 block north of you, there's a vibrant BIA there. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Well, that's the end of our prepared questions, but we have a number of pre-submitted questions that have been sent in, and I'm going to group a few of them because there's several that all have to do with advice for starting a small business. What's the essential first step of starting a business, and then what's essential to continue and grow it. First thing you should do if you want to start a business, first step to take for starting your own business. These are all separate questions that were sent in. And a slightly different take, what advice would you give to secondary students about small businesses and entrepreneurs coming from a teacher who will be teaching grade 11 and 12? So maybe I'll group those together in the interest of time and see what people have to say to answer those questions. Benson, do you want to kick off?
Sure, there are a lot of questions, and they're all good ones. We have a virtual incubator to help that is free service, 6-week programs. We've been admitting primarily women now through the YWCA, but we're open to others. And it's a kind of a program that takes people through 6 weeks and covers sort of the basic material that you might be wanting to think about before you start a business. And then we come up with a mastermind, and we're working on programs to support these emergent entrepreneurs as they grow. So we're not the only program in town, but there's a YWCA program, for example, that helps entrepreneurs. There's FEM entrepreneurs. There are a number of opportunities in Hamilton and elsewhere where you can get support for starting a business. I would say, first of all, to anyone, absolutely anyone, young, old, anyone, just get out there and try things out. Don't worry about coming up with a perfect business plan. Don't worry about coming up with a perfect model. Experiment and iterate. Much of what Tej was saying was that he was iterating. He was trying different things until he found things that worked, because that's the only way. It's only through failure that we learn. So you've got to expect that you're going to try lots of things. Some will work, some won't. But you can't learn how to ride a bicycle by watching someone. You need to get on the bicycle and fall. The same thing with starting a business. You can't learn by reading books and sitting in my class or Brent's class or anyone else's class. You only learn by actually doing it and experiencing it. And at any age, every lemonade stand I see, I buy lemonade, right? I mean, that's like, I'm committed to those young people. And I think it's an exciting opportunity for those people that are wired that way, for those people that are keen to take the calculated risks and that are self-motivated and willing to make themselves work when the payoff is unknown. And, you've got to get yourself up every day and face whether you succeed or fail. No one's going to be paying you for your time and energy other than yourself. So I think it's a great thing, but I'm wired that way. I can't help it. And if you're not, then there's plenty of great occupations to do. You can do a million other things without taking those sorts of risks. But if you are interested, this is a great time. That's the reason why there's so many startups happening now. The world is changing rapidly as we speak. And whenever things change rapidly, that's when opportunities are opened up. So if you can create a business during this environment that even X out a small profit, trust me, when we're past this and we're in the post-COVID environment, your business is going to go like gangbusters. So I would encourage everyone to do that. And in terms of, aid and support, go to these agencies. There are a lot of places that want to help you start businesses. Just be aware that, there's no free lunch, that, for Tej to get where he is, he had to work really hard for a long time. And I'm not even going to ask him how much an hour it would work out if we actually calculated it, because the calculation may not be so pretty yet. Okay. Yeah.
Thanks, Benson. Tej, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would really double down on a lot of what was said there. I'd also ask the big question that probably took me 9 years to really understand, as the core tenet of really starting a business that that could be successful, was to ask yourself why you're doing something. I to the teacher in grade 11 or that's teaching grade 11 and 12. I was 17 when I started my first business. So I was right there. I was those students. It was in the music industry. My background before beer and hospitality was in music. It was in management. I made music before. I found a group of artists and producers that were great, that didn't have representation, that were far better than I was at making music, but I had my shit together more than they did. So I figured I could I'll take care of managing your careers and figuring out a way through that. I ran that business throughout my time at McMaster. It's one of the reasons it took me 5 years to graduate instead of 4. I took a couple less courses in a few semesters to make sure I could do that. That led to some opportunities after university, as well as an entrepreneur in the music industry. But none of that was rooted in a why. It was because I could, because I I had some skills that made me facilitate some opportunity that really worked out. But there was a lot of trial and error. There was so much more trial and error and so much more, failure in the first 9 years between, 16, 17 and 25. That was educational for sure. That, again, to Benson's point, like, you really have to try things. You really got to experience it. There's no class or book that you can read that really teaches you, how to make sure you're getting paid on time. How to have conversations around around accounts. That was the biggest challenge in the music industry. But the question of why was what actually started Merit, and that for me, again, kind of rooted the business in a firm place before we even got started. Having that foundation, not just the why of fulfilling a need in the market. Hamilton doesn't have a brew pub. Great, we'll create a brew pub. But why am I really doing this? Because to Benson's point, the future is uncertain. The payoff is unknown. You need to be driven by some personal whys to get you through really long days, to get you through really rough patches. The last year and a half, it has had to have been rooted in why. Again, not just the original whys for Merit, but the whys that that grew out of COVID again as well. The desire to have a stronger business coming out of this than what we started. That that became a why for us. I think rooting yourself in those things facilitates the hard work and the other questions and the tasks needed to go from idea to execution. That to me is has certainly been something that I learned again through 9 years of ups and downs and failures before starting Merit, and is what we're rooting everything that we're doing in now to make sure that we can be successful going forward.
Okay, great. Fred, did you want to weigh in on this one?
I think I'd echo the why point, and also particularly that notion that it doesn't come out of come fully formed when you start a business, right? It's an evolution, and that clarity of what's your why. It's not surprising it might have taken 9 years, Tej, right? Because it does evolve over time as you experience it and you're in a business. So I think that the first step is some kind of passion or some interest or something that really drives you to get going, because you have to put a lot of sweat equity and tears. It's put equity and tears into it, if you want it to be successful. So it's got to be something that, really does drive you.
Okay, I'm going to squeeze in another question here. This is an interesting one, I think, particularly in the current context. How do you make peace with the fact that large companies get to play by some different rules, particularly as we're coming out of the pandemic? We're seeing things opening up at different rates for large versus small businesses. Tej, I wonder, I see a smile on your face. Is there something you want to respond to on that one? How do you make peace with that? That's
really difficult. And I think sometimes there is no making peace with it. I think sometimes it, especially over the last year and a half, we've just kind of had to say it is what it is, and we're gonna, play our game regardless, and we're gonna, execute our plan regardless. And we can spend a lot of time worrying about what someone else is doing. We can spend a lot of time, thinking about what if. But we got a lot of work to do, and we gotta, we have to roll forward with our plan. Regardless of what the landscape looks like for anybody else. It has certainly been, incredibly frustrating. The dichotomy of the current example of a stadium of 20,000 fans versus a restaurant with, that's 1,500 square feet that can only have 40 people in it. That's frustrating. And, when we have other, measures in place that, do ensure the safety and security of ourselves and our guests, which, to be clear, is the first and foremost, priority above anything else, that can certainly be frustrating. But at the end of the day, because of our commitment to again, first and foremost, safety and security, we're gonna, okay, those are the rules. We'll play by them, and we'll, be ready when anything changes. And in the meantime, if we can have conversations, whether it's at municipal, provincial, or federal legislative level, that can potentially provide some context and some perspective from ourselves, we'll do that. We're very active, in those conversations, and with our government, and they're happily listening, and I think happily listening. Again, but we also kind of have to keep our head down and just keep it rolling.
I think Tej has a really, good attitude with that, is that, you can be upset about it, but, focusing on what you can focus on is really important. I think the other thing is that, like, this pandemic, especially in the early stages, moves so fast, right? I'm not trying to give excuses to governments that are making choices that seem and were at odds with one another. But there was a lot of confusion, and there was a lot of differing things that go into these decisions, and they got a lot of them wrong, and then they got some of them right, and then they fixed some of them, and then they broke some of them. And I think, some of this is a manifestation of just how fast moving the conditions were. And it doesn't excuse it; it can explain it, maybe, and then realize that probably this is going to sort out in the medium to long term, but it has short term implications for sure.
Okay, so we're almost at the end. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but if anyone has one, please put it in now, because we're almost out of time. Otherwise, the last question I am going to throw out there from pre-submitted questions. What steps can businesses do to reduce their carbon footprint? A little bit of a different angle here. And Brent, I don't know if you want to start with that, and then maybe switch to Tej to say what your company's doing.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. I think every business has to be mindful of this and focused on, doing their part. It's a difficult question to answer because every business is so different, right? So, how a business that, every business is going to have different sources of carbon. So I think the first step, though, is to identify and audit your organization to understand where your carbon's coming from. And then you can look at taking action. So given our timing, I'll stop there, but understand what your problem is before you can fix it.
Tej, anything from you on that?
Yeah, I would really agree there. Our business is unique. We have our own, challenges when it comes to, our environmental impact. We, from the beginning, have planned around a lot of it. The use of water, in the brewing process is way higher than what people think. The average brewery uses about 11 to 12 liters of water to produce 1 liter of beer. That's a lot of water, and it's a pretty precious resource. And we've done some things just with the design of our brew house and our processes to get that down to about 5 liters of water to 1 liter of beer. And the globally leading breweries are at 3, and they've got literal lasers working with them on their on their brew house to help facilitate that. So we're we were able to plan for some of that. The pandemic has also brought in new challenges with that as well. The entire industry changing to takeout. Food packaging, is absolutely wild at some places. And so when you encounter a change, like a switch to takeout, we had to do an audit again, just on, okay, how are we packaging this up? Where are we sourcing our products? How do we, keep our food, hot and safe, and, able to travel in a car, but also, not triple bag and, quadruple wrap everything, because that's not necessary. So it's about sourcing, and thankfully sourcing environmentally friendly products is getting way easier. Both like large suppliers of packaged goods, for example, or dry goods are really making that a focus of some of their catalogs, which is great. But also the internet, there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot that you can do to make small changes, within how you're making decisions around your environmental impact. For sure.
Okay, great. Well, I'd like to thank everyone again, and to Tage, Benson, and Brent for joining us today. This has been a terrific discussion. I think we've had some great questions sent in and lots of great insights shared. We hope everyone has enjoyed today's Knowledge Lab webinar. Please continue to check the DeGroote website for upcoming webinars and activities. And we'll wrap it up there. We've hit 6:30, so thank you everyone, and have a great evening. Take care.